Okay, this is for factoring a product of quadratic, trinomial, and a monomial for Alex. Basically, when it comes to factoring, always the first thing you should do is see if you can common factor. And that's essentially what's happening here. You can see that there's an x in all three terms, and you can see you can at least divide all of these by 2. So you know you can common factor out. And so you always should common factor out everything you can. So I can take out at least an x from each of these, and it looks like I can divide each of these by 4. So I'm going to common factor out a 4 and an x. And so what does that leave me with? 4 times what? It gives me 12, 3. And I have 1 x, so it leaves me with, I'm only taking 1 x out, so it leaves me with 2 of the x's left in. Okay, and then 4 times what gives me 32? That's going to give me 8. And I'm taking 1 of those x's out, it leaves me with 1 left over. And then 4 times what gives me negative 12? Well, that's a negative 3, so I write minus 3. And then I'm taking that x out, so that's it. Okay? So now, once you common factor this out, then you just look at what's left over and see, can I factor that? And yes, you can see that it looks like it's probably factorable. We have a coefficient of the x squared term is greater than 1. So we're going to use, I like to use the factor by grouping method. So the first thing I do is I don't want to forget this 4x, but I'm going to not use it for a while. So I'm just going to bring the 4x down and put it down here so I don't forget it. And then the next thing I do is I multiply the coefficients of the first and the last term together, and I get a negative 9. Now I'm multiplying two numbers to get me a negative 9, but I'm adding two numbers to give me an 8. Here's my adding. So you look at all your possibilities of numbers that multiply to give you 9. So that's 1 times 9 and 3 times 3. Multiplying to get a negative, so I know one of these is negative and one's going to be positive, and when I add them together I'm going to get a positive number, so I want the smaller number to be negative. And so I can see right away that this is going to be a negative 1 and a positive 9. Okay? And so don't worry about this little x, it's just something that some people use. They put what multiplies here and what adds down here, and then what two numbers follow that pattern go here. Okay, so some of you may have seen this before. If you haven't, don't worry about it. Okay, so then we're going to rewrite this, the 8x, using the negative 1 and the positive 9. Okay, so write everything else down. 3x squared minus x plus 9x, okay, minus 3. So that's where we're going to use these two numbers to rewrite this value. Now, remember what we do when we have 4 terms. We factor by grouping, so we group two sets of numbers together. You're basically common factoring out of each group. So I see I can take an x out of both of these, and that's going to leave me with a 3x. And if I take the x out of here, I have to leave something in its place, like a 1, because a negative 1 times x will give me the negative x back that I want there. Okay, and then I look at my next set of numbers and I see I can common factor out a 3 from both of those. And that leaves me with a 3x minus 1. Okay. So then I can see I have a 3x minus 1 I can take out of both of these. And if I take a 3x minus 1 out of this value, I am left with an x. And then I look at the next group of numbers here, and if I common factor out the 3x minus 1, I'm left with the plus 3. So I put that here. And those are your factors. You can double check them. Okay. And then add them to the 4x. We don't want to forget that. Now you can see if you multiply, if you were checking everything together, you could multiply the 3x minus 1 quantity times the other quantity x plus 3, multiply those all together, and then multiply all of that by 4x, and it is going to give you this back. Okay, so let's look at a couple other examples. Okay, so 32x to the 5th plus 16x to the 4th plus 2x to the 3rd. I can see that I can common factor out an x to the 3rd, and the smallest number well, the biggest value I can common factor out of the 32, 16, and 2 is a 2. So again, take a 2 and an x to the third out of everything, and that is going to leave me with 16. If I take 3 of those x's away, it leaves me with 2 of them, plus 2 times 8 would give me the 16 I want, and I'm taking out 3 of these x's, so it leaves me with 1. And I'm taking out all of this 2x to the third, so I need a 1 there to hold its place. So you can see if I distribute this back through, I would get this value here. Now remember, I'm not done. Now I recognize that this is a special case here. If you don't, you can go ahead and do what we did last time, which is multiply the first and the last coefficients together. Look for two numbers that multiply to give you 16 and add to give you 8, and then rewrite and factor by grouping. But I recognize this is a special case. This is a perfect square, and this is a perfect square, so I'm thinking of, okay, the square root of 16 is 4, the square root of 1 is 1, and then I multiply those together. 4 times 1 is 4. If I times it by 2, that gives me 8, and that's what my middle term is. So that confirms that this is indeed going to factor to 4x plus 1 and 4x plus 1. Okay, so that is just one of your special cases. Like I said, if you don't recognize it, you'll be able to still factor by the method we did before. Okay, again, you can double check 4x times 4x is 16x squared, 1 times 1 is 1, and then your middle terms, this is 4x, and this is 4x, which adds to give me my 8x. Okay. So let me do one more so you can see one that works out a little differently than that one. It's not such a, it doesn't have that special case. Okay, so I'm looking at all these numbers. I can see that I can 6, 32, and 10, I can divide those all by a 2, so I know I can common factor it at 2. And then I look at the x's, x to the 7th, x to the 6th, x to the 5th. You can take the smallest power, x to the 5th, out of everything. And then you're common factoring out 2 times what gives me 6? 3. If I'm taking 5 of these x's away, it leaves me with 2 of them. And then 2 times what gives me negative 32, and that's going to give me a negative 16. I'm taking away 5 of those x's, leaves me with 1, plus 2 times 5 is 10. I'm taking away all those x to the 5ths. Okay, so again, remember, you're going to bring down this 2x to the 5th so we don't forget it. And then we're just going to deal with this 3x squared minus 16x plus 5. So 3 times 5 is 15. Looking for two numbers that multiply to give me 15, but add to give me this middle term of a negative 16. Okay, so you're looking at your possibilities, 1 times 15 and 3 times 5. You're multiplying two numbers to get a positive, but when you add them they give you a negative, so you have two negatives. So you can see this is going to be a negative 1 and a negative 15 to fit this pattern. Okay, so now we're going to rewrite the negative 16x using the negative 1 and the negative 15. So I bring down the 3x squared minus 1x minus 15x plus 5. We're going to group these. I can see over here I can common factor out an x, and that leaves me with a 3x minus 1. And in the next set of group of numbers I see I can take out a negative 5. Again, remember we want this to be plus and a minus just like this one over here. So we want to take out the negative. And that is a negative 3 times, negative 5 times a positive 3x would give me the negative 15x here. And a negative 5 times a negative 1 would give me the positive 5 that I get here. Okay, so we can see that I can common factor out the 3x minus 1 from both of these terms. If I take 3x minus 1 out of this value here, I'm left with an x. And if this group of terms here, if I take out the 3x minus 1, it leaves me with the minus 5. Again, you can double check this and make sure that when you multiply them all together, it gives you this value here. And then you can double check your answer, make sure it's correct. All right.